Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We are back talking again about the DISC assessment, breaking down each of the levels. So if you haven't yet listened to our previous episodes on D and I, today we're going to be covering S. So we do recommend that you go back and listen to D and I as we are heading into S, or steadiness, on the DISC assessment.
Absolutely. Just a quick overview of what DISC is. It's a behavioral style. It's been around since way back in the philosopher days, where they noticed that certain groups of people had certain traits that were common in each other. And fast forward, I think it was in the 1920s or 1940, a psychiatrist or something like that. Martin. Do you remember his name?
Oh, you are grossly exaggerating.
Marston. And he was a psychologist. William Marston. He is the one who put it together, like more officially, and wrote books on it. And now we have an assessment, but essentially it's like part of our DNA. We are born this way, and it's a way of understanding ourselves and each other and how to engage with one another. So it's been one of my favorite things personally for a decade and a half, at least, since I learned it. And I love it. There's so much knowledge in understanding the DISC assessment that goes beyond even just like superficial knowledge. So let's dive into S, the steadiness, which is what we lovingly call our nurturers.
Yes, and I want to say that one of the reasons why I really love DISC is that if you do fall under each of these letters, then you know more about yourself. But if you don't fall into this letter, if you're not an S, like I'm not an S, but it allows me to really understand my team and people I come into contact with. So there are so many things that I use DISC for now at this point, because since I've been doing it for a decade, it's so subconscious that it's almost, I meet someone, I'm like, oh, this person's an S, this person's a C, so it's actually kind of almost, it's instinctual now. However, I feel like I almost know the S's as well as I know D. So in the previous episode, I'm a high D, but I feel like I know S so well because I would say close to 90% of the people that are employed by me or contract through me tend to be S's for a lot of random reasons. However, it's been almost comical because I didn't know it at the time when I first found out Lynn was actually working with me, and she was like, yeah, everybody on your team is the exact opposite behavioral style than you. I'm like, oh, so I really, really, really know S's. And we talk about how there's not one that's better or worse than the other. And when it comes to S's, these are like your dependable people. They're patient, they're consistent, they're loyal, they're supportive. They really have they prioritize your relationships far more than they prioritize tasks, which as an ID, sometimes that's tricky. However, like these people are like salt of the earth, nurturers. They really believe in that deep commitment to people and the causes that they care about. And we talked about on the DISC side being people oriented versus task oriented and being fast versus slow. And when it comes to an S, they're going to be more on the slow to make decision side or the slower side, reserved. Yeah. And then also more people oriented, but these people are great and supportive, and they're great in collaborative environments. They're reliable. They can count on them to follow through with the commitments. And we call them like the salt of the earth. Like these are just so grounded and very, very, very people oriented, at least in my experiences.
Yeah. They typically aren't aggressive. They are all about fostering growth and cultivating growth. And think of them as like the roots of the tree. They're really the ones who are there long term. And yeah, they make you feel like you're the only person in the world at times. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Very thoughtful. They're more perceptive of others than themselves. And yeah, again, like Amanda said, on the cross, they're people and reserved. So they're a little bit, they take their time in making decisions. They actually make their decisions based on the people around them, how it's going to cause an effect, right? If the person is rooted in the community or not. They're not fly by nights. They're going to look at the whole. They want to make sure that nobody is affected illy about that, especially if they don't know the person. Another really cool feature about high S's is manners matter. They are really big into manners. They're a bit more formal than the other behavioral styles. And yeah, so in the way typically nurturers will be dressed, we'll say, or the steadiness will be dressed as usually in earth tones, a bit more simplistic, casual, where you'll never see a D wearing Crocs. You might see a high S wearing Crocs. Again, we are a combination of all of them. We just have our high one. So if you might have some of the other traits, but don't dress necessarily like a high S, that's okay. We are a combination of all. They usually will have subtle accessories, not a lot of makeup, if any, for women or men. With jewelry, it's usually meaningful, very simplistic, small pieces. Typically that has been handed down to them or has like great meaning. Again, understated while comfortable. You're going to see more linens, just more comfortable, casual, I would say.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the challenges that you face that an S will face, there can be resistant to change. They can struggle to adapt and, particularly adapting quickly to new situations. They also avoid confrontation, even when it's really needed. They will absolutely avoid confrontation because in a lot of ways, they don't know how the other person's going to react. And since they're so people oriented, they don't really want to go to that place. They often will prioritize other people's needs over their own, and that can often lead to burnout. So if the people who will often say that they have a burnout, this is definitely an S thing because they're just so emotionally burned out and they're putting everybody else in front of them. They definitely appreciate clear expectations, but they really need time to process change. So these aren't the people that you will spring on a new thing and expect them to fall in line within an hour. They will because they're loyal. However, they're going to have a better outcome if you give them like longer projects that have a clear expectation and that there isn't going to be a lot of crazy change. They definitely want stability. They don't want sudden crazy changes and disruptions in their day. You want to encourage them to express their own needs and opinions and definitely value how much they're loyal and acknowledge their contributions, because they definitely, again, in addition to the feeling the need for manners, they want to feel like their place is valued as a person, not just as somebody who's doing things.
Yeah, a couple more things to add to that is like in the pros and cons would be like they tend to have really deep empathy and sympathy depending on how emotionally intelligent they are. Will depend on which one that they are, but they can hold space. They're a team player. They tend to be a bit more stable. Amanda was saying about resistance to change and really like crossing the line. They have a really hard time saying no. So S's have a hard time saying no, which is something that if you're a high S, you should practice because it's It's not just for you, it's for them. And they do have a really hard time like sticking up for themselves unless, or like kind of crossing that line or getting into conflict, unless you hurt or affect somebody that they care about. Then it's like they will come all at you. So it's usually somebody else's trigger. Yeah.
That's that mama bear side.
Yeah. So when communicating or when they communicate, you want to have a softer, more appearance. Typically they will only say their first name if they even say their name. The focus usually when you're communicating with a high S is they're going to ask you lots of questions about you and forget to talk about themselves. They are the ones who won't usually if they're seated and you approach them, they're not going to stand up. They'll stay seated. And so when you're communicating with the high S's, you just want to remember a few things. First of all, you don't want to have laser beam eyes. You want to kind of like have a gentle gaze with them, a softer tonality in your voice. You're going to slow your pace down. You're going to soften your body language as well. You will have a little bit more, like Amanda said, clear and simple, not because they like clear and simple. They don't want to feel like they've been got over on, really. You don't want to pounce on them. And what we mean by pounce is just like be super aggressive and in their face about like, buy this, buy that, buy that. Like Amanda said, you want to give them time to process things. When you are connecting with them in a networking function, or maybe for the first time, if they don't know you, utilizing other people, maybe in your network. Oh, how do you know Amanda? I've known her for 5 years now. Well, we've known each other longer, but you know what I mean? Like you leverage your relationships with other people in order to be able to get the nurturer to feel a bit more at ease with you. It usually will take a little bit more time with nurturers. They're not your instant best BFFs because they need to feel like you're going to be around a while, that you're going to be a bit more rooted. Change is really hard for them, like Amanda said. So this is also in building new relationships. And so just keeping that in mind, that they're going to take a little longer to come on board, but once they're on board, they are the most stable, reliable, and they're the ones that you can pick up the phone and call any time of the day. And they're going to be wondering what's going on with you versus what's in it for them.
Or when we say that these are really your empathetic, all-in loyalty people, they absolutely are. And again, it may not be fast. They may not be your BFFs instantly, like maybe in a high I would, where everybody's your friend. They're in it for the long haul. So these are your loyal people, and they're great to have on a team because they do have that desire to be connected and loyal and really connect on a deeper level rather than just get it done, get it done, get it done. And I say that because I am a get it done, get it done, get it done kind of gal. And so having those opposite side of the spectrum can be really good in a team dynamic. And that's one of the things we really love. Like one of the things that's great about DISC is when you have a team of people, you can really sort of see where their strengths and weaknesses lies and how they can work together based on their behavioral style as well. Not just, what they do day to day, but just their behavioral style can help you put people in the right types of teams and the right positions within your company if you're hiring or whatnot. So, putting an S in like a customer service or HR is a great thing because they're super empathetic rather than, they're going to be much more patient in those kinds of roles than say a I or a D would be in general.
Yeah, I agree. Also, we speak about sales, and a high I is great to, or excuse me, a high S is great to have on your team because they typically know a good amount of people, and the people that they know, they know a lot about them, and they have a deeper relationship. It's not superficial typically. So the people that they know, the relationships are deeper. And so that means that their word has more leverage because they're not out there willy-nilly like, oh, let me do this, let me do that, let me do this. And so really in a sales capacity, or even a strategic alliance capacity, they are really great for your team in that way. Identifying them in a networking function or out in the public, we already kind of spoke about the way that the dress is, right? So it's a bit more casual, simplistic, comfortable. Some other things, they typically, like in a networking event, will be one-on-one with somebody, and usually in a closed group. Again, they make you feel like you're the only person in the world at times. So they'll make it feel like a really safe environment, even if you're not having an emotional time. So they're typically one-on-one or in very small groups in a closed communication body language. They will usually be on the outside, the perimeter of the room. Remember, when you are speaking with them, they won't typically get up if they're seated. So when you approach a nurturer and they don't stand up, or you see that they might not, get to their level. The second they feel like you're trying to over domineer, even if you are not that. And it's funny because every time I talk about high S's, I think of one individual, actually two, but one individual who was a team member of mine back when I was area director of BNI, and he was underneath me, and he was a high S, and just my energy like threw him off until he got to know me. And even when I was doing all of the moves of like trying to make him feel comfortable, it took him a while to really get to know me. But you never want them to feel like you're domineering them. You want to come from a supportive point of view, but not overly, not positive Polly. I want to help with everything, because if you don't follow through, if you go into this and you don't follow through, then they're going to have a problem with it. Eye contact, remember, they're not going to be the ones who are making super intense eye contact. They're usually a bit calmer. They can be a bit of a wallflower as well if they're not in a group.
When it comes to understanding your behavioral style, again, we are a combination of all of these. So when we talk about having your main dominant behavioral style, this is the sort of the thing that you fall back into. And there absolutely is the ability to morph and take on other behavioral styles in order to adapt to certain situations. But when we're talking about it in this context, this is sort of like your base level. Like this is your status quo, where you kind of normally will live in a behavioral style. And that doesn't mean you can't switch back and forth between other things. It doesn't mean that you can't be more extroverted or introverted, or that you'll never see an S in the middle of the room or up on stage. It doesn't mean that at all. It just is that they tend to be more towards one or the other, but we are a combination of them all. And that's why we do have in our show notes, we have a free DISC assessment. We want you all to know what you are. We're interested to know where our audience falls in that scale, because you're not all the same thing. And it is interesting because I've had people take the DISC and then years later they take it again, and it shifts and it changes based on how you grow and how you are. I will say though that mine's been the same for like 20 years. I don't think I've ever shifted bullheaded, but you can.
But that's kind of abnormal if you're taking a true DISC assessment. The ones that are online, I mean, we can definitely do a deeper DISC assessment and like because we have our natural and our adaptive, and situational will create an adaptive. But I'm a big advocate. If you take a few within the first year, you do get your baseline. If something's going on, I don't know if I was going through the divorce at that time or about to, but I definitely saw some different kind of peaks and valleys in mine, but my baseline stayed the same. Like it was pretty much always the same. A big situation that has PTSD can throw you into a different behavioral style, but usually it's just part of our DNA. It's the natural thing. And it's if we're living more in the adaptive or the natural style, but usually you keep the same, more or less.
But, I will say that there are some things, because I took a DISC assessment shortly after COVID, and it was slightly different, but I think it was definitely situational, because
Yeah.
the way I was seeing things was much more negative or, situational based. So there things will shift, but mine's been pretty much the same for all of time. But I definitely saw a change when I took one shortly after a bunch of my businesses.
You mean
closed during COVID.
you weren't a high D?
No, I was still a high D, but I had more changes of the other ones. Like I was always a high D, but generally speaking, it's like 100 or like 99% high D, and then like 0.3% of the other two or the other three.
Yeah.
However, during COVID, it changed a little bit, but I was still a high D for sure.
Okay. So that's what I mean by your predominant and your baseline should be roughly the same. There situations, environments, jobs, people can absolutely induce other part. For example, when I was COO, I found myself playing martyr. So I definitely forced myself to be more in a high S and a high D, because I'm a DI. But I was playing an S and being a martyr. And so, but that was adaptive. That was situational. It wasn't my baseline. Again, like Amanda said, like we've said earlier, is we are a combination of all. We will have our baseline and we will float in and out of things when we need it. But really, when it comes down to it, that core essence typically is one or two behavioral styles. And that's our go-to. And that's okay. It's knowing that and respecting that of ourselves, but also respecting others and knowing how to communicate with them just adds for better connection, better clarity, better movement, better sales. When you know who you're selling to, it makes it a lot easier to present in a sales way to that individual if you know what behavioral style they are, because you're not going to sell the same to each of them. So we hope that you enjoyed this, and we look forward to giving you the last one. There's so much information about DISC that we can definitely break down for you. Please reach out to us. Let us know. We would love to jump on a call with you. We can do an official assessment outside of the assessment link that we have in the show notes for you as well. We can get you pricing and all of that good stuff, but this is something that we absolutely love.
And we love it for teams as well. You're talking about how effective it is to know who you're selling to, but it's effective to know who's on your team and how they want to be treated, how they want to be spoken to, what's important to them in the job world. So there's so much you can gain from really understanding DISC for yourself and for the others around you, because it's all about that platinum rule, treating others how they want to be treated. And it makes a huge difference and trickles down in many aspects of your business and personal life.
Absolutely. So till next time,
get after it.
All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.